Comparing what with what? Imagine evaluating a potential project, such as establishing vegetation along a stream bank. Imagine that this project is not yet implemented, and we're wondering how large are the benefits likely to be. The question we'll address this time is, what do we compare with what to determine what the benefits will be? Let me clarify what I mean. There are various relevant scenarios that we could try to compare. One is the current conditions before the project is implemented. We could go and look at the quality of the stream bank now and look at the benefits that are generated by the stream bank in its current condition. We could look at the future conditions if we do implement the project. We could also anticipate future conditions if we don't implement the project. And the question is, well, which of these things need to be compared to determine the benefits of the project? Here is a graph that shows you how things might unfold, potentially, if we do or don't implement a project. The blue line shows what would happen if we did do the project. And as we go from left to right on the graph, as time passes, you can see that the values generated by the project increase over time. If we didn't do the project, the dashed line indicates that without the project, things would have stayed the same. They wouldn't have got worse, they wouldn't have got better, they just would have stayed as they were. And so in this case, at a particular point in time, let's say year 25, the benefit of the project would be the vertical distance between those two lines at year 25, as indicated by that red bracket. An example of a project that might look something like this would be the one I mentioned, restoring vegetation along a stream bank. This might have benefits in terms of improved amenity values for local residents, cooler local temperatures, habitat for wildlife, and reduced water pollution. And there's an example in the city that I come from in Perth, where vegetation was re-established along was originally a drain, and they converted it back to a stream. And you can see that over the course of about 10 years, the vegetation grew, and we went from having the situation shown in the top two photographs to how it looked in the bottom two photographs. Clearly a big transformation, and some big environmental and social benefits were generated. And the point is that in this case, we could imagine that without the project, it's reasonably likely that the top two photographs would have represented how things would have stayed. They would have stayed the same. So that first graph would have been a realistic depiction of how you would estimate the benefits for this particular project. However, that's not always going to be the case. There can be some situations where, in the absence of a project, conditions are worsening. So the dashed line in this diagram, going from 1 down to 3, shows a worsening of conditions over time without the project. With the project, we get that improvement in conditions up to the point labelled 2. And so this time, the difference between 2 and 3 at year 25, the benefit at year 25, is somewhat larger than it would have been if we'd only compared it to how the conditions were before the project was implemented. Because without the project, things would have got worse. This is a situation where it's even possible, if things are deteriorating rapidly enough without the project, it's even possible for a project to have benefits, even if it doesn't actually result in an absolute increase in the quality of the conditions. So here's a case where the conditions are worsening without the project. We're going from 1 down to 3 along the dashed line. With the project, we go from 1 to 2, but 2 is lower than 1. So after 25 years, even if we implement the project, things are worse than they were back at time 0. However, they're better than they would have been without the project. So the benefit is that difference between 2 and 3. It can also be the case that you get an apparent improvement in conditions, but the benefits are very small because those conditions would have largely improved anyway, even without the project. So in this case, because without the project we would have had the dashed line going up to number 3, the difference between 2 and 3 is only that tiny little vertical distance indicated by the red brackets. So when we're comparing what with what, and we have these various scenarios of before the project, after the project, with or without the project, then the benefits are always going to be calculated as number 2 minus number 3 for a particular year. It's important to realise that it's not number 2 minus number 1. We're not measuring conditions with the project versus conditions before the project. Before the project is really completely irrelevant by the time we get to measuring benefits at some future time. It's also not sufficient just to measure the benefits with the project and ignore a comparison with any other baseline. A benefit cost analysis always has to be done relative to a baseline, and the baseline is always what would have happened without the project. This is rather tricky when you're conducting a benefit cost analysis before a project has been implemented, because it means that you have to predict two sets of conditions. You need to predict what will happen with the project and what will happen without the project, and both can be quite difficult to predict. They'll depend on things like other existing policies and projects, existing trends, and people's behaviour. And you need to account for all of those things both in the with project scenario and the without project scenario. An observation that economists have made is that poor without project scenario definition often leads to exaggerated benefits and unreliable benefit cost analyses. Key points then. The with versus without principle, which we've been demonstrating in this video, is central to benefit cost analysis. And the principle is that the benefits of a project are the difference between what would have happened with the project versus without the project. And it's essential to any sound system for evaluating a project. It's not the same as comparing results before versus after the project. And an observation that I would make is that evaluations that don't use benefit cost analysis often get this aspect of the evaluation wrong. So it's one of the strengths of using benefit cost analysis is good thinking about with versus without the project.